I want to welcome everybody back to the Evolved Sales Leader, powered by Overpass.com. I'm Jonathan Fisher. Prospecting is one of the most critical skills that any successful sales organization must master to be successful. But with so many changes in recent years, how do you know what's going to actually work? And it's becoming more challenging than ever with all of the post-COVID changes in terms of workplace and in terms of lifestyle as well. Well, in today's episode, we're going to bust 3 major myths of social selling that might be holding you back. And we're going to outline an exact plan of action you can use to build a prospecting effort that is proven to actually work today. And here to share those insights with us are Morgan Smith and Nicholas Thickett. Morgan and Nicholas actually are the co-founders of Aligned, a consultancy in the area of B2B prospecting, and they actually co-host the B2B Power Hour podcast as well. We're going to actually go through and give you an actual guide on how to build better prospecting today as well. And Morgan and Nicholas, we're making a big promise on the show today. And earlier, Nick complimented me on my facility with the tools inside the Restream platform. And thanks a lot, because you can see the result of that now, Nick. I've done a great job with the tools so far.
But that's Master in action. I'm learning.
If you're watching live, this will be edited out later, but you can see I totally messed it up. But that's part of being live, right?
You're doing great, Jonathan. I love
it. So a reminder to our live audience, we're glad that you're here. Go ahead, don't wait. Start putting your questions into chat. When we're through with the core conversation, we're going to have some live Q&A at the end right here, right now, with our experts, Morgan and Nick. So Nick and Morgan, just to begin with, how did the two of you come by the insights you're going to be sharing with our audience today?
It's a great question. I was about to say the same thing. It's a lot of failure, a lot of just messing it up. My background is in marketing. Nick is a seller. We had started to talk and collab, and what we had figured out was that a lot of modern outbound just wasn't aligning with the way buyers bought anymore, right? By the time a seller or an SDR might call a prospective buyer, that buyer's probably already made up their mind about the right brands they want to buy from or the people that they're going to ask for a referral. And so we started to experiment and figure out, okay, how can a sales organization methodically actually do this and run sales development motions with a process that's repeatable, that's scalable, and that actually generates closed-won deals, not just a bunch of fluffy meetings with people who are out. And so that led to a lot of failure and experiments, mostly on LinkedIn, to figure out how sales orgs can really do this right.
So Nick, Morgan mentioned that failure has been a good teacher. Tell us more about that. What have you guys tried that at first did not work very well?
So when we first started talking about social selling, what it actually was, of course, what does everyone do? Pitch slap. So we were trying direct messages. We were trying to go and write content. And you guys might be surprised to hear this, but it didn't work very well. And so we actually went to guides. We started buying guides. We started reading books. We started listening to podcasts. We started going everywhere we possibly could go and find to try to learn. And what we realized is that there was a lot of theory out in the world and there wasn't a lot of practical knowledge. And so me and Morgan just decided to go and be mad scientists and just start experimenting and track everything we did. And honestly, that's all the podcast was at the start, was just sharing all our failures as we built in public. And as we kept going over and over and over, we started to get little wins. That trial and error would slowly pay off. And I think that's what's going to lead to a lot of the big myths that we're going to talk about today.
Well, I hear you, and I know a lot of entrepreneurs will definitely nod their heads in agreement that failure can be a great teacher. In fact, it probably requires a certain critical mass of failures to get to the maximum of success. That said, we always like to shorten our curve by learning from the mistakes of others. So you're here to help us do that today, guys, and we appreciate that. So why don't we start with some of the myths that are out there? What's one? Just lead us off with one, guys. What's one main myth that you think a lot of teams have today in prospecting online?
What do you think, Morgan? Where do you want to start? Oh, you're muted.
I know. I think you should start with your hot take of the decade.
Ooh, are we talking about
Indirect.
So one of the biggest myths
Hmm.
is that direct messaging is the fastest way to get business. It's not, which blew my mind. I assumed that if you had a really great problem statement and really, really honed in that change management of sales, that why change, why now, why you, that if you could really distill that into a really great statement, throw it into an email, throw it into a personalized invitation, that was just chef's kiss. It'd win every time. And what happened, I think, is everybody just got so bombarded with information over and over and over and over again that our mental spam filter became a brick wall. And so even the most beautiful of messaging gets stuck behind Morgan on the outside and never makes it in there. So it's there, but it's just not doing the work that it should be.
And honestly, indirect, Jonathan, what we mean is using engagement where you're not trying to book a meeting, where you're not trying to close the deal. So, and that can look a lot of things on LinkedIn. Most of the time, that's comments and that's conversations, but that aren't really at all about, hey, Jonathan, you have this problem that I've identified through these 3 criteria. I think we should have a meeting. Like,
Yeah.
that's not indirect prospecting. Indirect's like, Jonathan, you just posted something really good. I'm going to comment in a question and I'm going to start warming up that relationship. That's indirect.
Yeah. I
And
mean, would you say it is a manifestation of this overly direct method where, you say yes to a connection and boom, here comes the automated pitch?
so that used to work. I will be very clear. Like that myth is based in truth. But what actually happened when and I actually went back to networking and really thinking about what it meant to be social. When somebody said before social media was a thing, what did it mean to be social?
Hmm.
And I used to spend a ridiculous amount of time going to this event and that event and that event. And that was my main way of getting business because I was selling to a local market. And what I realized at the end of the year when I was doing a reflection is I wasted a lot of time.
Hmm.
And I was trying to figure out why. And when I did my win loss analysis, I realized that one thing, only one thing, happened every single time that somebody bought from me. And this led to a really interesting rule: vampire sales. And by
Mm-hmm.
folklore, vampires weren't allowed in your home unless they were invited. And so
Hmm.
what I realized is that I had to hold off on my pitch until I was invited. Is every time I was interesting enough to hold that conversation where they said, "So what do you do?" Or they knew a little bit about me, so they would ask me a very specific question or about a problem that they were having, that it really opened that door to a deeper conversation.
Hmm.
And so what happens a lot of the time when you go direct, as me and Morgan joke about the people that go to networking events do the drive-by business carding, they just throw a card at you, means nothing.
Yeah.
But what doesn't happen in these conversations is the flip.
Hmm.
And I struggled for a really long time to figure out or put a name to this, or like what it actually meant. And when somebody invites you to pitch and they start diving really deep into a conversation, the flip is you switch from the seller to an asset, to
Hmm.
somebody that brings value, to that advisor. You're the lens in which you are seen changes forever, and it opens the door to doing really good business. And it takes time, but until that flip happens, you are just a seller and you're going to be stuck playing the price game, or it might be okay if you're selling commodities. But like Scott had said with Refine Labs, Six Sense, Lavender, Chili Piper, all these players, when they get their message out there and repeat it over and over and over, it's a seller's dream, because you're walking in that if you can go and bring some insight to that conversation, the flip is almost automatic. Morgan, would you add anything else to that?
I think it's dead on. And Scott had a good comment about Gardner's research that, when we are perceived as sellers and not advisors, when we are perceived with commission breath instead of somebody who's here to help, buyers are naturally resistant to engaging with us. And
Yeah.
social media is a social platform. We're supposed to be social. It's not a sales platform. So we should lean into those strengths of the channel first before we turn to using it for sales.
Yeah.
So how do we make that switch? Like, obviously, there's a role that we play in bringing, bringing a pipeline to bear, right, and closing deals.
course.
So, and everyone knows that, it's no secret, right? So, is there science to this? I mean, it sounds like it's more art than science to me. But talk to me a little bit about that. Tactically, what can you do if you're on the front lines?
So really, there's a couple of things, and my mindset is start with the low hanging fruit. Okay, if you have a big list, find the list of leads who are actually active on the platform. It's not worth your time to go after somebody who's not active on LinkedIn with an in-mail or a connection request. You should find the people who are active first. We call those tier 1 or tier 2 leads, people who are posting content or people who are commenting. Because if you can identify those leads who are posting content, then you can start by commenting. And all you have to do is obey the rule of 3. So we have vampire sales, don't pitch until you're invited. The rule of 3 is don't send a connection request until you have 3 round trip conversations. So what that means is I drop a comment on Jonathan's post, he responds. That's 1 round trip. Then I respond, then he responds. That's 2 round trips. Then I respond, then he responds. That's 3 round trips. Now I can send a connection request that's personalized, that continues the conversation from the comments into the DMs and guides us maybe towards a meeting, right? For those who aren't posting comment but are commenting, what you want to find are who are the people they're commenting on? Who are the influencers? Where do they go to for professional development or industry knowledge on the platform? Because chances are, if your ICP buyer from this list follows a certain influencer, there are other ICP buyers who also follow the same influencers. And so now you can leave comments on the influencer's post, of course, to get in front of these ICP buyers. But then you can also respond to the comments that your ICP buyers are leaving on those influencers. And once again, obey the rule of 3 before sending a connection request and then going into conversations and DMs and booking meetings. So really where you're starting is where's the active piece of our audience, right? Who's actually on the platform? And then engaging with them meaningfully before doing the more direct methods like a connection request or a DM.
So the first place my mind goes then is managing this, and tracking KPIs becomes a whole different game when implementing a model like that. And by the way, just a friendly reminder: we're going to bank all of our questions in chat until the end of the conversation. But so obviously you can't like immediately put somebody in a pipeline that you're on round 2 of your round trip messaging thing, right? So how do we manage this? I mean, if our myth is direct, I mean, part of the direct is the best way is I can say, I hit these numbers, boom, 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 and I got, it's going to be maybe single digit responses, but at least that is a metric. So talk to us about that challenge.
Me and Morgan might have a different opinion on this from each
Even
other,
better.
which we'll see. The marketers, but
and just clarify, Nick, for the audience, you're the marketer side, correct?
No, I'm the enterprise seller. But one thing I always looked at is you have to always have momentum and consistency in your pipeline. And so the same thing should happen with your pre-funnel. So when it comes to having conversations, I actually thought of it like a sports analogy of like first string, second string. And so what I would try to do is I try to have 10 warm conversations that I was getting really good feedback. They were responding to me back really quickly. They were asking really good questions. They were diving deeper. And so I would actually create a list in Sales Navigator of warm. And then what I'd actually have is a second tier that was like lukewarm or people that I was in conversation with. And so that's all I would track. And I would try to go and do more of like a churn management model where as people were, advancing, I'd move them up. As people went cold, I'd take them out, but I'd throw somebody in. And so that way, I always had really good consistency in my pipeline. But the thing that really blew me away that I was not expecting in our experiments was another rule, the 15-minute rule. And so I'd always learned that, sales is in the follow-ups. And if you just, keep going and you're consistent and you keep pounding the pavement, like eventually you're going to win. But what I found is that when you're having a really good, conversation and comments and DMs, that over 90, almost 100% of the time, people will ask you for a meeting in 15 minutes of your time. So if you were hitting a timer every single time you went to go and comment back, or you went to go and respond to that DM, 15 minutes is the max. After that, the likelihood of you getting that conversation converting isn't there. But what also really blew me away that I was that I assumed those people that didn't book that meeting in those 15 minutes, it would be follow-up that would win, right? Naturally, that would, as a salesperson, you would assume that. It wasn't. 100% of the people that came back after was because of content nurturing. What I didn't know at this time is when LinkedIn sees that you accepted my connection request because we are engaging in comments, and then I sent you a DM, is that we have a relationship, that we like you like the content I'm posting, or you might like the content I'm posting because you like talking to me. So it actually prioritizes in your feed. So now it's like top of mind, top of feed. And so they get to nurture this opt-in nurture over time, where that insight builds until that frame hits, that they have enough accumulation of knowledge that it's time. Now they're ready, and they'll circle back into the DMs to ask you for a meeting or continue the conversation.
That sounds really interesting, Morgan. And one thing just to clarify, when you're talking the 15-minute rule, I want to make sure I heard that correctly. So if I don't want to wait longer than 15 minutes to do the next response. Is that what you mean? So like over 40, or no? Okay, I'm sorry.
No, so it's a gut check. It's a benchmark where you don't want to waste time on prospects that aren't going to become booked, meetings. And the 15-minute rule is that really, if you're not making headway with this prospect in the first 15 minutes of effort, and you're not getting them to book a meeting, that's fine. Leave it be. They'll come back to you later by nurturing them with the content. But the people who are going to book meetings with you, they're definitely, when following vampire sales and the rule of 3, they're going to be engaging with you for a meeting within the first 15 minutes. So it's just a gut check to keep yourself honest and not chasing leads that take too much of your time on LinkedIn.
Okay, I thank you for clarifying that. And that makes a lot of sense. So it kind of frees you from having an open loop on a given contact that you're making. I like that.
Exactly.
Open loops are the enemy. Right?
Ain't that the truth?
Well, and the thing too that I like about what you're saying here is that this is a trackable activity, right? So if I'm managing a team, I can actually go through and pull my team members. How many warm conversations did you have? That now I've got a workable KPI that isn't on an outdated model. So that's very powerful.
And Jonathan, just to clarify one thing that we sort of glanced over is I wouldn't be adding these conversations, these people into your CRM until they have a meeting. They're not leads. They're just conversations at a networking event. That's all they are.
Yeah, you're at a coffee shop. You're trying to find the right coffee shop, and you're mixing and matching here. One of these guys may end up in your pipeline. They may not. But yeah, I got it. That's good stuff. Well, and this is prospecting, right? I mean, you don't put if you're putting prospects in your pipeline, you're doing it wrong, right? So hopefully people in our audience probably know that, but just at the risk of overstating. So starting too directly is passe. The new model is have a systematic way of building a more authentic connection to somebody first. And just to recap, you have this vampire sale. That sounds interesting to me. Idea that you should not pitch until you're invited to. You're not welcome to the house until you're invited. And there is the rule of 3. 3 interactions prior to asking for a personalized connection. Great actionable stuff, guys. So let's move on to the next myth. And I think you give me a heads up that the next myth is that you need a personal brand to succeed. I want to go ahead and put it up here because you do hear that a lot. And I mean, I've even had experts on the show here that say that, build a personal brand. They have some good ideas as to how you can go about that. And some of that seems like it does work. You guys may have a different view. Talk to us about personal brand and its role.
Just to set this up, Morgan, I was so floored when we were sitting in a meeting and he tells me, because Morgan used to be a brand strategist. He built the brand of a city in Colorado. That was what he did through economic development. And then he says to me, I think the biggest thing that people misconstrue is that you need a brand, that you need to be an evangelist. That is the way to win at social selling. And then I'll let him carry it from here, but it was so mind-blowing.
Yeah. The reason I think this is a myth is, as a seller, you have quota to hit.
Hmm.
And any branding project is at least 90 to 180 days worth of effort. So the dividends that anybody is going to reap on a personal brand, or the discipline that is required to become an evangelist, you're only going to see it 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the line. And we work with sales teams all the time about using social, right? Using these frameworks, implementing them. And the main thing that they all come back to me and Nick about is, what do you mean? I have to post content? I have to develop a personal brand? That's this big myth that people have. I just think it's wrong. You can have one, right? That's the differentiation here.
Hmm.
And it is something that's maybe worthwhile in the long run to invest in if you think social is your superpower. If your superpower is on the phone, but you're using social to just warm up relationships, you don't need a personal brand. You don't need to invest in it. And if your superpower is writing really well-researched emails, or an email sequence that just gets the attention of, VP level stakeholders, but you're using social for that research and to warm up those engagements, you're not going to become an evangelist, right? Social is not your superpower. So if it is, it might be a good fit if social really is where, you find your home. But this leads us down all sorts of rabbit holes if you think a personal brand is required. It's like Alice in Wonderland. We get
Yeah.
distracted by all the little things here or there, because
Hmm.
now it's, instead of, I need to go engage, I need to have a highly targeted list. I'm going to find my active prospects. I'm going to warm up those conversations. I'm going to obey the 15-minute rule. I'm going to manage my time. I got other things to do. Where does every seller start if they have to build a personal brand? Well, I need to write some content.
Yeah.
It's like, content should be the last thing you do.
Mhm.
Content is way down the line, because
Yeah.
content's about nurturing. It's about nurturing the relationship in feed. It's not about trying to, generate all this inbound traffic in the next 30 days, because by default, it's not going to. So you don't need a personal brand to succeed on social. You need a workflow that gets you in front of active prospects in a
Yeah.
meaningful way.
And the irony, the reps that we see winning with content win in the one-on-one. So that's as sellers, we always get taught to do those one-on-one conversations.
Hmm.
And so they validate one-to-one, which hopefully you do before you automate anyways, but they'll go one-to-one, 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 testing these different insights, testing these different conversation starters. And then once they find something that keeps winning, there's their content. Now they post it to an even bigger audience.
Hmm.
And so I think that's one of the things that I love about more sales-led versus marketing, is we're testing it with real people and then putting it out for the rest of the world. Not, hopefully not living in our little boxes, researching in isolation, never talking to anyone, and then putting it out in the world to see if it works.
Well, I mean,
Seems
this
to go
this really
backwards.
speaks again to not being too siloed, marketing and sales. I mean, the marketing department, like this whole other notion of sales enablement. I mean, that philosophy should be part of your marketing already, right? That, what are you doing if you're not enabling your salespeople to succeed? And that integration is really powerful. It's almost applying an agile development strategy to your marketing and sales, right? Where you're taking the feedback
Yeah.
in real time and then redeveloping your content to the audience. You already know it's been validated. It's product market fit, right? This is good methodology applied to marketing. We're already using it in half the tech applications that we're trying to sell anyway, right? And it is proven to work. I like that. I like the fact that you also could take a real world conversation that could become part of the content, right? Hey, I was talking to Bob of XYZ company and we discovered blah, blah, blah. That's engaging, especially if it's like legit. You can kind of tell. Most readers, I think, can kind of tell if that's a put on or if that was really a conversation with Bob at XYZ company. Maybe XYZ company's happy for the additional shout out anyway. So you got my juices flowing here, guys. What else about that second myth about personal brand? I mean, it sounds like the issue I've had with it is that you're almost asking for salespeople to have this whole other set of competencies that aren't actually selling anyway, and that seems like a pretty high bar. Would you guys agree with that?
100%.
Oh, Morgan, you should
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about your attention versus credibility.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. So
Hmm.
here's the thing, that we confuse attention for credibility.
Hmm.
And if you think about it, there are tens of thousands, if not millions, of salespeople who have absolutely no LinkedIn profile, but they sell
Hmm.
wonderfully. right? They don't have the attention of 10,000 followers. They don't have the social presence. But what they do have for the prospects that they sell to is credibility. Credibility is composed of trust, good intentions, capabilities, and results. So people are going to be asking you, can I trust you? Of course. Are you showing up with good intentions? Can you actually solve my problem? And are you as good as you say you are? Those 4 questions can be answered without 10,000 followers, right? Which is also why we talk about indirect versus direct engagement, because when you go direct, somebody's immediately going, I'm not going to trust you. This person's just pitching me, got another seller. I don't need their solution, right? No credibility at all. It's the credibility challenge on social, really. So when you go indirect, you're building credibility. The reason that I think you're dead on, Jonathan, is that when SDRs or AEs are hired into an organization, they're hired for a specific kind of competency, and that competency is credibility building. Now, in traditional sales, the credibility building usually happens once that lead is in pipeline, right? They make the cold call, they send the cold email, then the SDR hands it off to the AE, and the AE builds credibility with the buyer through discovery and demo calls. They answer those same questions. Can I trust you? Do you have good intentions? Can you solve my problem? Are you as good as you say you are? The beauty of social is that you can answer all of those questions before the person shows up in your pipeline because you're using engagement. You're creating content. You're having natural conversations. So you're creating credibility without necessarily having tens of thousands of followers. We worked with a seller, actually a sales team, and he had, I think, 800 followers when we started, or 800 connections or something like that. Okay. And within 60 days, just by commenting, engaging with the right people, doing some of the stuff we talked about already, and then repurposing, as we talked about, validated topics as content or validated questions as content, he created something like 35 inbound leads and booked meetings inbound onto his profile, people sending him direct messages, the flip, right? The vampire sales here in about 60 days, and closed, whatever his close rate was actually pretty good off of that. I know it was well above 30%. So that you don't need thousands and thousands of followers to generate those kinds of results. And sellers shouldn't either, because they're credibility builders. They're not attention seekers. Like us marketers, oh God, throw me a content marketing strategy any day of the week. I'm going to go out there and get you all the attention that you want. But it's more about credibility in social if you're trying to drive pipeline.
Yeah, I love that. And we're going to nail this final myth very quickly just for the sake of time, but about 60 seconds. We kind of have been speaking to it already, haven't we? There's the myth that you should start with a direct message rather than comments. And I still get them. I guarantee you gentlemen got them. Probably everyone listening or watching today got them today, right? Multiple direct messages. Hey, we have this solution. Check us out. We can do this. We can do that. We're better than sliced bread. And you're saying it's a myth. Talk to us just a little bit more about that for one more minute, guys.
You're also selling yourself short. This is the one thing that nobody tells sellers. When you go default to DMs, it's only one-to-one. But even with emails, they give you a limitation. There's no limitation on comments. And what LinkedIn is trying to do in every platform is they want you to live in the platform. So the more you do that, the more they reward you. Well, comments, how they reward you, and you guys have probably seen this in your feed. It'll say, so-and-so liked this, so-and-so commented on this. And so you can think about, as you're doing these comments, that there's nodes in the system. So you might be talking to one person, but they're connected to 1,000 people. Well, of those 1,000 people, just a few of those people comment too. Well, now you get another, couple hundred. Next thing you know, 10,000 people have seen that comment, and we know that birds of a feather flock together. So think of that ability to create conversations with the right people at the right time like that. That's really hard to replicate on a one-to-one, even with the right sequencer and setup.
Oh, Jonathan, I think you might be muted.
That makes so much sense. Thank you. User error. That makes so much sense that you're really there's this whole capability of the technology on the platform that you're missing out on by going overly direct. It's kind of I'm just saying the same thing you just said, Nick. When you're commenting, it's unlimited. You're going to get the technology working in your favor and getting attention to kind of resonate. That's very powerful. So, well, guys, you've given us a ton of great and very actionable insights. We got one more promise that we made at the top of the show that it's time for us to deliver on. You guys have a really cool offer. Tell us what you have. You've got a really neat downloadable guide. Who wants to explain that?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we always hear from sellers is, okay, how do I actually do this in practice? Thanks for, the insights, but like, what's the step-by-step thing? So we put together a guide on booking meetings using comments. It's available just on our homepage at b2bpowerhour.com. You can go grab it there. We've put together step-by-step instructions of finding influencers, using what we call social listening or LinkedIn's native search to find conversations, how to leave a good comment that's beyond just thanks for the post, and like what to say, and then how to transition with vampire sales into the DM so you can have that meaningful conversation with the prospect. So if you're looking for those instructions, you can just go to b2bpowerhour.com and grab it on the homepage.
So you guys are basically dating consultants, essentially, for salespeople, right? Is that fair?
Engagement for salespeople. Well, yeah, well, and I would say
Right?
the other good part is that we, bridge that really tough conversation with marketing to give them guidance on content worth publishing.
There you go. I like that. Great segue, and maybe a subtle hint there. I don't know, but no, good stuff, guys. Well, audience, it is time. We're going to get into that Q&A section of things, and we've got already have a good number of questions queued up and ready to rumble. I want to go ahead and lead off here with one that we got from Michael Novick. He would like to know, kind of along that line, what are some of the best ways to get alignment between your marketing and sales? Do you have some advice on that?
Yes. So one thing that nobody ever tells you about sales and marketing is it's a tacit knowledge, meaning that it's built on pattern recognition or expert intuition. That expert intuition is learned through trial and error. All of us are working in our own silos, doing our own trial and error. When was the last time you talked about someone in your office, sales or marketing, about what you've tried and what worked and what didn't? We went and met with a company that had in the room, I think the lowest seniority was 22 years. The highest was 37. It was the first time they'd ever talked about account strategy when we were having a conversation with them. First time ever. It was not because there was no incentive for them to share. Well, that stuff that they had tested in market, that they've never told marketing that. So think of how powerful it would be if marketing is taking all that trial and error, putting it into a document, putting it into a file, however that's being captured, and if they meet monthly or quarterly to share that on an ongoing basis. Now, all that trial and error is captured with scenarios, which that's how tacit knowledge is built, is mimicry, apprenticeship, and osmosis. And so if we don't work in the same environment, listening to everyone around us like we did in the bullpens, if we don't have an apprentice that we're running with, like we're not job shadowing, and if we're not like somebody's not leading us, showing us by example, kind of on that apprenticeship side, we lose all that trial and error and we're stuck doing it ourselves.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that was from Scott Marker, by the way. Scott's a friend of the channel, so Scott, thanks for that great question. Here's another area that is getting a lot of attention right now, and this is from Lindy. What's you guys' hot take on chat GPT and the whole AI thing?
I definitely have a spicy take. I think it will completely change campaign-based selling. It will reduce barriers to entry completely. So anybody can send a really good campaign. And I think it will increase the premium on really good account-based sales development, because the things that make account-based sales work when you prospect into mid-market and enterprise, the AI can't replicate. A language learning model can't replicate the insights, the relationships, the psychology, the intuition of mobilizers and buying committees and internal politics and all the rest of it. It's just not going to be useful on account-based stuff. So I think within the next couple of years, every campaign-based sales motion is going to be using AI. And I think it'll be a very noisy and sad world in some ways, in the race to the bottom for the scraps, basically, of...
I want to challenge you on this a little bit, Morgan.
Okay, I know I've dropped this hot take. Go for it.
Here we go.
No,
Okay.
I agree.
Controversy
But
here on
everybody here that are not here, but like everybody we talk to talks about Chat GPT is either content or the messaging? What did automation do to help us? Actually did nothing. It actually made it harder to sell. So we're actually going backwards. If we think of what happened to a lot of large companies, the ones that are thriving, like when GE did their 2x2 framework and they got rid of the underperformers, everything big went small. And so if we think about this, well, the thing that's really lacking in sales isn't the abundance of messaging. There's a lot of garbage messaging, even good messaging, but what's missing is good lists. That has to have a contextual reason to reach out. So what what it can do is that language model can find those right conversations at the right time, so you can show up in the most meaningful moment in that buyer's journey. And so I think it's actually going to accelerate really good list building instead of the most generic list building that we deal with now of, this is a nice wish list logo company that we'd love to work with. Oh, why? Oh, I don't know. We just love to sell them. So what do? Hey, we're the fastest growing company. Hey, we're the highest rank on G2. Hey, and it's like, so what? It doesn't pass the mum test.
Right.
And it's not relevant to my situation. So I think the biggest thing is going to be better list building. And after that, maybe it'll be more.
Well, and I think like any tool, it has to be used in a way that makes sense, right? You can't use a hammer to turn a screw. So it definitely has some things it's capable of doing. You do get these sort of end of the world apocalyptic visions of robots taking over. I think some people get their hair on fire about that kind of thing with this. I'm more in agreement with a previous rock star guest we had on, Victor Antonio, who says if properly used, this stuff can make sellers sell even better because it's going to take a lot of the mundane tasks away from their workload. They can focus on what they do best, the human element. So I think there's a lot of exciting potential here. As long as there's a plug in the back you can pull out of the wall if it gets out of hand, right? So
that's the hope.
Yeah, right. So here's actually an interesting thing too. I think maybe it warrants a little bit more attention on how that all works. You could build on this. So how do you get the conversations to get into your feed, asks Brett Wagner, without asking for a connection first? And maybe this is just not commonly known. I actually didn't know that either. I thought you kind of need to make a connection, and you kind of like, okay, how's that all work? So maybe you guys could give us a quick little user's guide on that front as well.
I would say without connecting with somebody, there's really two ways to get that content, and use your spreadsheets, your bookmarks to your advantage to do this. So one is to use social listening, and that is using LinkedIn's native search to search for specific keywords or topics. And when that search result pops up, you can filter at the top. There's bubbles that say posts. And so you can click posts, and then you can sort by, if you have a specific geography or an industry or a specific author even that you're trying to find, you can use LinkedIn's native search to find those conversations. And what I would do once you found the right filters is I would just bookmark that URL. So instead of having to redo that search every single time, you have a quick link to access that search. The other, which is a little two-step approach, is if you have 10 or 12 active prospects on the platform, those tier 1, tier 2 leads, I would go, and I do go to those profiles of those leads, and I look at their activity. So what I would do is I would go to, if I'm prospecting Nick, I would pull up Nick's profile. I go to his activity feed, and I would look at all of his activity. And as I scroll, what I'm looking for are posts with a lot of engagement on them, maybe a lot of likes, maybe a lot of comments. What that indicates is that person is probably an influencer or a thought leader of some kind. And then you can review their profile and see if they're in your industry and if it's the right fit. And then I just create a short list of those influencers that my ICP buyers pay attention to. And then instead of necessarily using LinkedIn's bell or any of sort of the native notification features that get really overwhelming, I just pull up those activity feeds of those influencers or their posts on a daily or weekly basis, and then go in and comment. So those are two ways to find content without necessarily connecting with a prospect directly.
Good insights. I appreciate that. And sort of a related thing too, not only about getting that interaction to work with the technology, but like, what are your thoughts on the platforms? Like, where is the ICP really, asks Michael Novick. Where do you post? LinkedIn obviously has a lot of market share here, but talk to us about some of the other alternative ways.
Channel scoring is so underutilized when it comes to companies. And the thing is, every function, every seniority will default to different channels or associations or places to learn because different places will bring different types of knowledge. So, like Facebook, maybe that's where, or Facebook and Instagram might be a certain genre or it might be a certain demographic. Where, like, for example, YouTube is really great when you need to do visualized learning. So when you're
Hmm.
demonstrating something from start to finish, you can do it on LinkedIn with videos. It's just not as powerful. LinkedIn is a really great place where it's a community in the comments. So you have a main piece of content and anchor that people should dive deeper in the comments and engage that way. But it's you got to really look like a lot of engineers and IT people we talk to, they still live on Reddit and Medium,
Hmm.
or they have Discord channels or maybe Slack. And so you don't need a huge mix. You don't need to be everywhere, but you need to really consider where people naturally go to learn and where people they trust. So think of their day-to-day routine. And I think this is why I say it's people usually just default to what's easiest for them or what the company can most easily track.
Yeah, that's good. I've got a follow-up question of my own here in our Afterglow session, and that is, what about a startup company that has no identity, no brand yet? They're still in the early phases, and they're trying to be truly agile, right? They got the developers working hard. They're trying to build their model, get their story together. What do you recommend? Like, do you think a content-based approach could provide a little pull to complement this more organic thing you're talking about? Could we do some seminars, lunch and learns? Can you have? Is it worth putting some effort on that? Maybe as the very tip of the tip of the tip of the spear. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a great question. I've often called this the layer cake. So for when you're an early stage startup, the thing that you don't know is what do your ICP buyers actually care about and what are their actual pains that will prompt them to buy. You probably have a couple of customers, but there's not enough. You probably have one customer that's like an odd job that you just agreed to. And so you don't have like the sample set yet. And so you need to go and figure out that sample set. So the layer cake is this idea that every single layer you're adding on top of your content. And what I mean by each layer is an individual post, an individual event, an individual whatever that you're putting out on a specific platform is you want to see, is it resonating?
Hmm.
Are our buyers actually paying attention to this?
Mm-hmm.
And Nick and I went through this ourselves. We went through and developed our own layer cake. And so we were using content to iteratively test and validate messaging in market with our buyers. So we would use it in our comments. We still do this, by the way. We would use this in our comments and we'd, structure the message a specific way. And then did they only like it? Did they respond to it? Did they send you a DM and go, wow, that was like the best thing I've heard in the last 3 weeks? Or is it complete silence? Same with content or an event. Did you get okay attendance? Did you get a lot of attendance? Did you get a lot of engagement and follow-on conversation? Trying to triangulate what are those specific pains that our buyers are experiencing? What is the messaging that resonates with those pains? That is the way that you can use content to iteratively test and get in front of those buyers when you're an early stage startup.
Quick follow-up to that. What type of assets do you prefer? Do you, videos, postables, downloadables? What do you like? All the above?
I mean, I think some of it's channel specific. If we stuck with LinkedIn, I think the defaults of like text, image, video carousels are always good.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the point is not like, let's not confuse the attention credibility thing here, right? I've posted stuff that gets hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of likes and leads to absolutely no follow-on traction. So I had all the attention, no credibility. What I'm interested in is, can I post a video that gets 2,000 views, but that gets 3 DMs from ICP buyers asking me, hey, can you say more about that? Or really liked your post today that made me think differently. So I think it's the asset themselves are trying to spark conversation. And what I'm looking for is not the performance of the asset, but what's happening around it. And am I getting more activity and engagement off of it?
Yeah. Well, and then Nick, you can follow that up with conversations. What are some tips you can give to that side of the table when you're getting the engagement, but they don't know who the heck you are, but you at least have that baseline of credibility that you've been talking about.
Yeah. So if you guys look at like Will Allred at Lavender, and so they're an email coach that lives in your inbox. Well, in order to be recognized as an email coach, the founders need to be seen as an email coach. So you got to think of the category that you're trying to fit into. And so if that's the category, then you need to go find those conversations to put yourself in a place where people start to trust you and see you as an email coach. And if you keep repeating that over and over and over again, not only are you going to do what Morgan said and test that narrative, but you're also going to get those different connections. You're going to build a community, and it's going to go and start snowballing. And so go find those conversations, use social listening to go and find key terms. So like, for example, if I wanted to sell social selling services, I might find people that are complaining about cold calling. Hey, cold calling doesn't work, or complaining about their sequencer. Little things like that go such a long way. And just like obey the vampire sales, try to be there to be that value add, to add that clarity so they understand the problem and give them a takeaway that they can apply right away.
I love it. Well, guys, final comment. I'm going to end on this from Robert John. He says, as someone who works in a team who's constantly trying to figure out how to better market ourselves, I'm genuinely excited to apply your approach on LinkedIn. And I think a lot of our listeners today are going to echo those sentiments. Morgan and Nick, you've done a great job dropping some truth bombs today, adding value. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. We really appreciate it.
All right, and that's going to do it for our episode today. A big thank you to our show's sponsor, Overpass.com, and a big thank you as well to you, our listeners. You've made the Evolve Sales Leader such a big success, so be sure to come back next time and bring a friend. We'll see you then.